Hello, everybody. Today we're going to talk about the brain, the most important part of your body systems. This presentation is brought to you by Grace Manucci, Joaquin Tonino, Caleb Atwell, Starla Hansen, and Victoria Peters. So, first off, we're going to talk about the cerebrum of the brain. The cerebrum is the largest and most developed division of the brain. It is divided into the left and right hemispheres, which is connected by a bundle of nerve fibers called the corpus callosum. The cerebrum controls conscious or volitional motor functions, and damage to the cerebrum leads to loss of muscular power and precision, rather than total paralysis of the body. The cerebrum consists of white matter and gray matter. White matter consists of myelinated neurons, which makes up the cerebral medulla. Gray matter consists of unmyelinated neurons, which makes up the cerebral cortex. The cortex of the brain has a big role in memory, attention, perception, awareness, thought, language, and consciousness. In regards to language, the brain contains Broca's area, which is a region in the frontal lobe of the dominant hemisphere of a person's brain, whose functions are linked to speech production. Awareness area is involved in the comprehension or understanding of written and spoken language. The brain contains 4 lobes: the frontal lobe, the parietal lobe, the temporal lobe, and the occipital. The frontal lobe plays a role in the planning and implementation of movements. It contains the olfactory bulb and the motor cortex. The olfactory bulb directs axons to the olfactory cortex. The olfactory bulb directs axons to the olfactory cortex. The olfactory cortex is involved in discriminating among odors, enhancing sensitivity of odor detection, filtering out background odors, and permits higher brain areas of arousal and attention to modify detection and or discrimination of odors. The parietal lobe is involved in somatic sensation, or the feeling of touch, and proprioception, which is the sense of relative position of one's own parts of the body and strength of effort being employed in movements. The temporal lobe is involved in processing and interpreting sounds, and contains the hippocampus, which processes memory formation. The occipital lobe is involved in vision, which is just involves seeing, recognizing, and identifying the visual world.
The brainstem controls our automatic functions, breathing and heart rate, and visual and auditory stimuli. There are 3 parts of the brainstem: the medulla oblongata, the pons varioli, and the midbrain. The medulla oblongata controls our reflex centers and our consciousness. It also connects the brain to the spinal cord. The pons varioli helps control our breathing, heart rate, swallowing, and hearing. The midbrain controls the movement of our head and eyeballs and of our trunk, and it controls visual and auditory stimuli. The diencephalon is the posterior part of the brain, which includes 4 parts. Those 4 parts are the epithalamus, thalamus, hypothalamus, and the subthalamus. The subthalamus helps in regulating motor function or movement. The thalamus regulates the body's voluntary motor control, consciousness, and the sleep-wake cycle. The hypothalamus links the endocrine system with the autonomic nervous system so the body can maintain homeostasis. The epithalamus connects the limbic system to other areas of the brain. The functions of its components include secreting melatonin and the hormones from the pituitary gland.
The cerebellum plays an important role in motor control. It can be separated into 3 lobes: the longular lobe, anterior lobe, and posterior lobe. It has 3.6 times the neurons in the neocortex. Its surface is covered with finely spaced parallel grooves. The grooves conceal the fact that the cerebellum is actually a continuous thin layer of tissue. Separated from cerebrum by thin layer of dura mater, cerebellum equals classified as part of the mesencephalon. Both motor skills and high-level brain processing are involved in the cerebellum function. It's essential to many fine adjustments to motor actions. It has 4 principles of function: feed-forwarding, processing, divergence, and convergence. External processing is mostly feed-forwarding. Cerebellum receives input and transmits output via a limited number of cells. Cerebellum structure is divided into thousands of independent modulars with similar structures, and it has most neurons out of any part of the brain.
There are many brain diseases, and the broad term for these diseases are encephalopathy. The first one that we are going to talk about is Alzheimer's. This is a common form of dementia, a term for memory loss. While it is most commonly associated with older people, about mid-60s and up, it is not an age-related disease. It is a progressive disease, meaning it gets worse and more damaging as it develops. In the beginning, it may only cause mild memory loss, but in its much later stages, those affected can lose cognitive ability and ability to react. The second disease I want to talk about is meningitis. This is an inflammation of the meninges, and there are multiple types. The first one being bacterial. It's a bacterial infection, and it's possibly deadly. Like, many people die from this one. The next one is viral. This one's less severe than bacterial, but it is still possibly fatal. There's fungal, which is very rare, as well as parasitic, which is just as rare as fungal, and amoebic. This one has very serious effects, possibly even more serious than bacterial, and can lead to death. The last type of meningitis would be non-infectious, which is caused by cancers, drugs, or brain damage. Next, I would like to talk about epilepsy. This is an excessive or abnormal brain activity which is characterized by seizures and a loss of consciousness. It is caused by neurons sending out the wrong signals. Those affected behave odd and have strange sensations or emotions.